And welcome back to the Movie Pope podcast. And today is a first. Once again, we are going to be reviewing the trailer for Robocop Rogue City, and we're going to use this as an opportunity to talk our about our favorite Robocop movie and our thoughts on the franchise in general. But before we do that, remember to like, comment, subscribe, and let us know what your favorite Robocop movie is in the comments below. And as always, thank you so much for watching. Let's dive in.
According to our sources, the attacks were aimed at catching the attention of a man whose identity remains.
Detroit has a cancer, and that cancer is crime.
A new crime wave sweeping Detroit has already claimed the lives of 21 police officers.
Using those commercials, always a theme within RoboCop.
My name is Dr. Olivia Blanche. I'm a police psychologist. I specialize in dealing with police officers suffering from emotional trauma.
What's hiding in that metal head of yours?
I think we can both agree that you are no ordinary police officer.
Reinforcements have arrived.
Those trigger-happy maniacs have a ton of hostages.
Drop it, scum.
Anyone expecting a silver freak? Contact!
Lewis, you're here.
We need to get these elevators back online.
It's Robocop!
It's that service box, isn't it?
I am detecting a short circuit.
Oh, here we go. At 209.
I'm looking at the map of this place, and it's huge.
OCP tracking device torn out. I am going to follow the blood trail.
However, one aspect
Interesting. That was from RoboCop 1, right?
Severely
Yeah.
neglected is your human side, your brain.
We must smash that thing.
I've heard people refer to you by different names.
Okay there, Murphy?
Fire at will.
I'm curious to hear which one you prefer.
My name is...
So that was the trailer for RoboCop Rogue City, a game that's going to be coming out pretty soon. I will say this. I mean, they did get Peter Weller to come back and voice the character, which I thought was pretty good because when you think of RoboCop, there's only one actor you think of is Peter Weller, because the remake that they did a few years back, I think it had Joel Kinnaman in there. I saw it and I was like, no, this doesn't feel right. It just doesn't. You know.
No. What about the third one?
The third, I mean, the third one I was kind of indifferent about because I know Peter Weller wasn't in it, but I thought the actor in it he did a mediocre job, all things considered.
Okay, fair.
Obviously the storyline was very much different from what you had from the first two, but and I've told you this before. I mean, my favorite RoboCop movie is RoboCop 2, where he goes up against Kane, who's placed in the updated RoboCop suit, and the two kind of duke it out in the streets of Detroit. What's your Moviness's favorite?
How is okay? So number one, right? So we got four, right? There's not.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe there's some type of side things. So we have kind of like the first trilogy of three, and then we had the remake that came out in the early 2010s, right? I think it was 2013, 2000, something like that, right? So to me, one was the really only good one. I didn't actually care for any of the other ones. I thought the first one was very solid. There definitely were things that I thought could have made it better. I didn't care for the second one. The third one was an absolute pile of crap.
I agree with you on that one.
Yeah, I think the reboot, it didn't do a very good job, but it expanded in some areas. I wanted to see them expand the original one in, but even though they did expand in some areas, they didn't really improve it a whole lot. And I think one of the things that, just to kind of give a very high level comparison, in the first one, we don't really get to see a whole lot of RoboCop prior to him, getting shot up, and we don't really see a whole lot with him and his family. And the family kind of plays like a recurring, a recurring theme throughout the movies, but we actually don't really see him interact with his family prior to that. I always thought that was kind of weird, because if I want to have any type of engagement in him kind of like getting closer to the family. I need to see and know that he had a good relationship with them, but we don't really see enough of that. I think in the remake, they try to rectify that a little bit. The problem is that the guy that plays RoboCop, and Luca, help me out. What was that guy's name? The one that's in,
Joel Kinnaman.
Joel Kinnaman. Thank you.
Yeah.
So Joel Kinnaman, so he was just so bland. It was hard to really get with it. Like, you want to see more of the family, and they gave that to you, but you don't really get the feeling that it's a super great family. Like, it just doesn't get depicted that way. It just seems kind of like blasé the whole time. And he's just such a stoic character. It's hard to really get involved with it. So, it just, as for me, the first one was really the only one that I could safely say I thought was good. The other ones I felt like just had too many holes.
I mean, that's a fair point. I mean, I like the first one, but I really, really enjoyed the second one just because I felt like it expanded with with the RoboCop character, and it definitely and you definitely got to see a little bit more about who he was as a person, and the fact that he's I mean, he's the guy, he's a guy who's now been melded with the machine, but you also get the feeling that that even though he's been equipped with this emotional inhibitor and his family's trying their best to try to reconnect with him, and he brushes him aside, at the same time this is it's reminding us that there's still a man in there, and that it's still and for for all of the for all the circuits and machinery in there, it's still Alex Murphy who's coming out and still doing his job as as a police officer at the end of the day.
Yes.
Not to mention, I was really, really fascinated with the fact that you had a villain in Kane who starts off as a drug lord, and his brain gets removed and placed inside this machine that's supposed to be the successor to the RoboCop program, but instead he goes batshit crazy and starts tearing the city apart just to get the next dosage of nuke. So I thought that
Who could have ever foreseen that happening?
I mean, I just thought it was a pretty good foil because because you've got this updated machinery that's supposed to be an improvement on RoboCop, and yet you can't really improve on the original because even though you've got this high tech machinery, just putting the brain of some drug this drug addicted crime lord in there, it's obviously not going to make it any better, even if you're trying to withhold that drug from him to make him do his job. It's not going to work out too well, which I thought was pretty funny. And not to mention, I did enjoy the fight sequence quite a lot. I've watched that numerous times over the past few years, so that's me.
This is So let's talk about the villain, right? You mentioned Kane. So I think a big part of me, right, is I like the villains so much more in the first one, right? I like them so much more. I enjoy them a lot more because here's the problem that I have with Kane, right? Number one, he's this, guy, and he plays the character so laid back and totally it's just not very enjoyable. And the fact that the company, right, OCP, is thinking oh yeah, well, we're going to transplant this person's brain and we're going to have the brain of this crazy villain, right, that we're going to put in there, and we're expecting it to somehow be normal, was totally stupid. You could see the writing on the wall from beginning to end that it was not going to work out.
Remember, there was a sequence where they were showing different types of prototypes where they were putting the brains in different suits, and they all went batshit crazy.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, right. So they do try to explain that, but like I said, there has to be better examples of who you're going to bring in than bringing in some guy that's, a serial, a guy that's literally the mastermind of a cult, right? It's just, it made no sense to me. I get what they were wanting to do because she was she said something to the effect of, you have to have someone that can, be okay with almost being eternal, right? They're pretty much just going to live on. And you have to have someone that can rationalize that. I'm so Kane's the first person that comes, and I know that they tried it a few other times, but it's I don't think convicted felons are the way you want to go, especially because we know through RoboCop that they still retain parts of their memories. So like, I don't know if I want to have Jeffrey Dahmer in a freaking machine. Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me how they wanted to do that. I know they try their best to rationalize it, but to me, they don't really do it. To me, I think RoboCop 1 is where it has the good villains, because, you know, you have kind of, I just call him Red, right, from that 70s show.
Oh yeah,
right?
Kurtwood Smith. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So he does such a fun job. Like, he sits there, he totally eats the scenery every time he's in it, and he just is totally enjoying the moment. So, you know, you have him throughout the whole movie. You know, he's sitting there and, you know, he's getting to, you know, all this stuff. I remember, like, when he's doing, like, one of the deals, like, he, like, you know, one of the people he's, you know, doing a deal with has, like, a glass of wine, and he seemed like he just sticks his fingers in there, and then the guy drinks it afterwards, and, you know, he gets in a fight with RoboCop, and then he, you know, kills that one executive guy, and he's like, just walks in the room, and he's like, bitches leave. And I'm just like, man, this guy is totally taking that moment and enjoying it. And then to me, because we know what happens at the beginning of RoboCop, we're so much more invested in RoboCop killing the villain, right? Because, like, we literally see them. I mean, they do a great job of that first scene in RoboCop where, you know, they're literally lining him up. They shoot off his hand, and then they just blow him away. And then Red comes over, shoots him once in the head, and then, you know, we see all that. To me, that's incredible. That was such a good job of showing it. And they really waste no time. Like, we're 10 minutes in and we get RoboCop. Like, they don't, they have no breaks on this. They're just going all in. And, like, to me, that's what makes, that's at least one part of the first movie, which I think really excels in, is we do have a legitimate interest in them getting to the villain. Like, RoboCop killing the villain, we have a huge interest in it because we see how he's had a direct impact on that. And then we see, too, how, you know, through that, we have, like, one of the heads of OCP, you know, he does a deal with Fred. So, like, we kind of see how, I mean, we already know the company's evil because of everything that happens. I like how, like, they have this, like, like, at the very beginning, right, you had the Ed 209 in the boardroom, and he just shoots the shit out of that one guy. and they just kind of, it's just funny. Like, the reaction is, like, they're scared, but then, like, the president's, like, rolling his eyes. And I'm like, holy shit, like, this is not a reaction that when something faulty happens, you shouldn't have someone dying because of it. So, like, you clearly see how, you know, the company's evil. We know Red's evil. So they have all this evil stuff. And to me, that culminates very well in kind of creating this very strong, you know, story of RoboCop getting his revenge and be able to kind of go against that. Whereas for the second one, I didn't really get that at all from the villain, or really any of the villains.
Right. I mean, that's fair. That's fair.
Plus, like, and let's not forget too, the most memorable death, right? What in your opinion, right, from first and second one, right? What was the most memorable death to you?
Well,
any of the villains.
Well, if I'm honest, it would be Red getting his just desserts in RoboCop 1, because that's
no.
Go ahead.
That's good. So to me, right, it's the guy that ran the truck in the toxic waste and becomes this toxic waste human being that's walking around. That to me blew me away. Like, that sticks out to me no matter what. I do agree with you. Red getting his comeuppance, so to speak, was really good. But to me, that one henchman that's just walking around, be like, kill me, and he's just like sitting there, he's like all deformed and stuff from the toxic waste. That was great. And then, you know, Red's just driving through there, and he just runs into him, and he just splatters on the car. That to me was absolutely crazy.
I totally forgot about that.
Oh man, yeah, that to me is great. So that to me, like I said, it's, you know, it's not a huge thing because it was just a henchman, but to me, that's always like the most memorable thing. Is just seeing that guy walking around like Quasimodo, screaming for someone to kill him, and he just gets splattered on a vehicle, and that's pretty much how that gets resolved. So,
well, do you have any other thoughts on the RoboCop movies before we sign off?
So, I mean, I would say for, you know, the first one, you know, I really liked how they kind of depict everything. Like, I've always really enjoyed that. And Paul Verhoeven, also did Starship Troopers, which I'm a huge fan of. Really like that.
Mhm.
And he kind of does this, and I think you really see that he knows how to kind of create this kind of like weird dystopian thing, and he always uses propaganda as a tool in his storytelling. And I thought that was very interesting throughout, is like how they kind of use like the commercials, they use all this stuff to kind of help generate the world that we live in. And it's just the world that they exist in, excuse me. And it's always very interesting. Like they have the commercial with like the girl, and she's like putting on all that sunblock, and it's like turns her skin blue. And then there's the Surgeon General warning that's like, hey, if you use this too much, you get skin cancer. And it's like, so you're using sunscreen to make sure you don't get skin cancer, but excessive use of the sunscreen also gets you skin cancer. It's like, that's kind of weird. And then there was like another sequence, right, where there's a new vehicle that's out. And I'm going to test your knowledge on this, Luca. Do you remember the name of the vehicle? What the name is for the new vehicle that comes out in the first one?
Ooh. Off the top of my head, I don't.
It's okay. So it's the 6000 SUX, right? So it's literally called the 6000 Sucks, and it's just like, I think to me, it just goes with kind of how they deal with that satire. It's just, to me, such a good job of doing it. And it comes in something that you don't really think about. It's just random commercials, just like kind of like random, kind of like show sequences and everything like that. It's really interesting how they kind of splice that in. And like I said, I think they do, a good job. I think really the one thing that stuck out to me the most in the first one was, like I said, we see RoboCop, he gets in the suit really early. I really like the suit, and I think like his acting in that RoboCop outfit is really strong. Like, he feels very robotic, and I think that does take a certain skill to kind of create that with like kind of his movements, and everything's kind of like a full movement. So you don't see him like he kind of like shifts his body, and then his head shifts with it. So I think there's just a lot of things that work well with that. Like I said, I think my only real notch on the first one that sticks out to me is just that, I always felt like they try to add in a lot of these human elements that just don't feel earned because we never got to experience that. I do think the second one does a better job with that, because the second one we see that, and I think you mentioned the scene very briefly, but the scene where, his wife comes in and, he has to sit there and tell her that, I'm just a machine, I'm creating his image to memorialize him. And to me, that was such a good scene because, like, even though they don't have a ton of screen time together, like, you can see that, she really loved her husband, and seeing kind of this mirror image of him, even in the robot suit. And just knowing that, like I said, that, Murphy has memories of it. Like, he is still very much there. The, kind of see him have to do that was really good. I think that was the one thing that stuck out to me in the second one. But like I said, to me, the second one just had too many things that didn't work. The other thing that I thought was weird, and I know it's kind of a weird thing to discuss.
Mhm.
All the okay, so how they dealt with like having like kids in it was really weird to me, right? So, number one, like you have like the kids that they're helping rob that one shop, right? That one store,
Yeah.
right? And Robocop comes in, and I get like this is a sequence, and this is one of the parts I really didn't like was like how like he got reprogrammed, but like it lasts for all 5 minutes. I'm like, why did you bother reprogramming him? Because he just gets rid of it really quickly. It's just totally pointless to have it in. It's just a plot that goes nowhere. So like he comes in. I'm like, you know what? Honestly, this world that they created, they would arrest and shoot kids no problem. I'm just gonna say that now. Like, this does not come across as a world where they care about kids. So like when he's like when the one kid, right, that works with Kane, right? The one that's from the Mighty Ducks, right?
Yeah, the one who eventually takes over the operation. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. The one that takes over the operation, right? So he shoots RoboCop, and do you remember the reason why RoboCop doesn't do anything?
I think it's because he's a kid.
Yeah, right? And I'm like, no, that's stupid. RoboCop would totally blow that kid away. In the world that they've created, where literally everything, there's so much mayhem in it. They would totally kill that kid. I just didn't believe that for a second. Like literally the opening for 2 is you see like an old lady, her like cart of cans gets hit by a car, and after that she gets mugged by a guy. The guy walks away. He has a bunch of, I don't know, like I guess prostitutes mug him and beat him up. And then there's like, afterwards, like there's a store that explodes and people like there's just so much chaos that they create. I don't believe for a second that they would blink an eye at killing a kid if he did something wrong. I'm not saying that they would just murder kids for fun, but I'm like, I don't believe for a second that they would have some type of thing built in where they're not going to do that. This does not feel like a reality that's something that's super critical for the Chicago area. So I didn't believe that at all. Totally would have shot that kid in the face.
You mean Detroit?
I'm sorry, Detroit. Yes, I'm sorry. Yep. But yeah, I didn't believe that for a second. That kid would have got shot in the face.
Fair enough. But I mean, but I stick by with what I said earlier. I think with 2, you kind of see his humanity more fleshed out. Yeah. I mean, at the very beginning, he kind of pushes that away, but by the end of the movie, where Lewis is saying, how we're gonna, it's gonna take us a long time to catch these guys. Robocop says, patience, Lewis. We're only human. I thought that was a pretty good line, but
yes, I agree with you. Right, there are some things that work, but as I said, I think if we're comparing them as a whole, one does a lot of things much better. I like Robocop more than that, and I felt like it was more to the point. 2 to me had too much fluff. There was like all this type of like, kind of, it felt like they focused a lot more on the villains, which was weird because none of them really kind of mattered or made a difference other than Kane. So, kind of like have Kane and then you have like his love interest, but like it never really did anything for the story. The kid's along and I don't really know why. There was a very touching scene where the kid gets shot, or I'm assuming he's shot because I don't think they actually show it. But like where he's shot and he's dying. And I like how Robocop just kind of held his hand.
Yeah. That's after Kane attacked the that facility, and the mayor was there. Yeah.
Yes, the deal with the mayor, and the kid. So yes, I agree. Like the humanity shows through better in this one. I just think that there's too much of everything else didn't work. Right. I didn't really care as much for Robocop in this one. I thought that it was a little bit too over the top. Like you start to see like at the end. Like the OCP logo is like on a red banner, and it looks.
Yeah, they're
like
going for the Nazi.
Like Nazi. Yeah. It's totally over the top. It's like, okay, like it was more subtle in the first one. Now we're kind of getting into it's like borderline ridiculous. Like there's satire, and then there's that, and it was just over the top. And I thought they kind of had that reprogramming sequence where it's just like they had the board meetings like. I've never seen him talk about like environmental issues, or I never seen him do this. And like they like have this like random 15-minute sequence where like they reprogram him, and then like he's kind of off, and then he electrocutes himself, and then he's fixed. I'm like, why did we include that? Like that was 15 minutes that we didn't need, that went nowhere because he got reprogrammed just to be shocked, and then he stopped acting like that. It just felt like totally pointless. Like I think those were kind of the things where there was just threads that didn't go anywhere. The other thing I always thought that was weird, right, was how they depict Lewis, right? And I know we've focused a lot on Robocop. Lewis to me was always kind of a weird character, right? So in the first one, right, she's kind of depicted. Let's see here. Do you remember how when we first meet Lewis in the first one? Do you recall what she did?
Oh, it's been a long time. All I remember what she was doing in the second.
No, that's okay. So in the first one, right, the first thing that we're introduced to Lewis is she's arresting someone, and then they try to break out, and she kicks his ass. I'm like, okay, cool. Like, so she's, a badass cop, right? She's a badass female cop. So I'm thinking like, okay, that's something that's going to stick with them throughout the movies. And then the second one, she gets strangled by a little kid. And I'm like, okay, wait a minute. Now I'm confused. Like, is Lewis good or totally incompetent? I don't know which one, because in the first one, we're first introduced to her being able to beat up, someone that she's trying to arrest, right? And then the second one, you're getting strangled by a kid. Like, you have to pick a lane there. So, like, there's just inconsistencies that I didn't like, and I think that just built up more and more. I think RoboCop 1 by far is superior. I have other than the humanity piece, which I agree with you on, that's the only thing that RoboCop does better. But between Portrayal of RoboCop, just the general feel for the city, the story behind it, like everything else was to me far superior.
All right. Well,
superior.
All right, well, that will do it for our review of RoboCop. Like I said, if you guys have any opinions, or if you agree with the Movie Pope or disagree with them, let us know in the comments below. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and catch you on the flip side. Bye.